Hey guys, for this week's class, we're going to be focused on hip external rotation and abduction primarily, learn how to improve and control that. All you'll need is a PVC pipe for one of the drills we do later on. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Quadruped and we're going to work on axial rotations of the hip for a hip car. So what I mean by that is we're going to set up hands and knees. Now from here, all we're going to work on is extension and external rotation of the hip. So I'm setting up, I'm going to get up as high as I can towards the ceiling with my glute. I'm going to rotate out as much as possible, keeping my body nice and still. And I'm going to rotate back up. Make sure I keep my hip up as high as possible the entire time. We're going to do this 4 times, nice and slow. Rotating out, keeping my body as still as possible, and then rotating back in. Here we go for 2 more. Keep that knee up high, rotating out towards the camera. Coming back up, try to touch the ceiling with your heel. 1 more. Rotating out again into as much external rotation as possible. And rotating back in nice and slow. Gonna flip sides and do the same thing. So hands and knees, build up tension throughout your upper body. Extend back as high as you can. Rotate out as much as possible. And then rotate back in, nice and slow. Again, we're going to do 4 on this side as well. Rotating out, keeping that knee up high, rotating back in. 2 more. Rotating out, back in. Focus on both elbows staying nice and straight. And one last one, rotating out. And now slowly going to bring it back in. With axial rotations, you can take any range of motion throughout your car and just rotate in both directions with it. So that's an example of doing it for extension and external rotation. So our first position for today's class is going to be butterfly position. So what we're going to do is we're going to set ourselves up with our feet touching, bringing it as close to our groin as possible. We're going to put our hands on our feet. And we're going to pull our knees down towards the floor, trying to keep my chest upright. Okay? From here now, we're going to work through a PAILs rails contraction to try to improve the way the hips open up. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands on my ankles. I'm going to push my elbows into my knees. So what I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to push my elbows down towards the floor. I'm going to try to push my knees up for my PAILs contraction. I'm giving equal tension so that we stay still. For my rails contraction here, I'm going to try to pull the knees further towards the floor, try to take the elbows out of the equation altogether. So again, PAILs pushing up, rails pulling down. So hands on the ankles, elbows on the knees, chest up nice and tall. We're going to push down 25% as hard as we can. Now from there, we're going to work up to 50%, pushing the knees into the elbows, elbows into the knees, staying nice and tall throughout the upper body. Now we're going to gradually work that up to 75% as hard as we can. Remember, make sure that there's no pain with this. Work through whatever pain-free range you have. And now we're going to push at 100% as hard as we can. Elbows into knees, knees into elbows, holding for 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rails contraction, try to pull the knees towards the floor. So I'm trying to drive into more abduction, external rotation here. Really trying to open up, trying to touch the knees down towards the floor as much as I can. Hold for another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, freeze there. Don't let your knees come back up. As we always talk about, anytime you do a PAILs rails, it's important to make sure we don't come flying back out of that new range we just earned. So we're going to hold that position now for 5 breaths. Nice and relaxed. After we take 5 breaths, we're going to work through that again through our new range of motion. And again, there should be no pain in the hips while you do this. Anything in the knee or ankle, back off of that range of motion a little bit. Okay? Push at lower intensities as well. So instead of going to 100%, work between 50 and 75 as long as that's pain-free. If there is pain with this, you should be referring out to some type of FR practitioner in your local area. So after you get those 5 breaths, we're gonna start it back up. PAILs contraction, pushing the knees into the elbows, elbows into the knees, 25% as hard as we can. Now we're gonna ramp that up to 50%. Try to stay nice and tall through the chest. Knees into elbows, elbows into knees, 75% as hard as we can. Now your hardest contraction, pushing both together. Knees into elbows, elbows into knees, holding for 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rails contraction again. Drive the knees further towards the floor. Make sure you stay nice and upright, trying to touch the floor with your knees. You're going to keep holding for 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax there. Take 5 full breaths. Nice relaxed breathing, trying to get used to the new position. And another point we always talk about, we always want to hold for 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. Just for time constraints, we're holding for 5 breaths, but if you're practicing on your own, make sure you hold this stretch for longer amounts of time. We're going to take 2 more breaths. And relax. You're going to stay in that position. So now to further solidify that range of motion, we're going to go through some eccentric neural grooving. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring one knee up towards our chest here. So I'm going to bring it up as high as I possibly can. Okay? So now what we're going to think is this is going to be a battle between my elbow and my knee. So what's going to happen is I'm going to push this down towards the floor. I'm going to allow my elbow to win. I'm going to really fight hard with my knee to make sure it's slow, under control, and it's a long eccentric on the way down. So build up your tension, trying to keep your opposite leg nice and still. Stay nice and tall through the chest. You're going to start pushing down, nice and slow, making sure it's nice and smooth. And once you get all the way down, we're going to bring it back up. We're going to do that for 5 reps on each side. So again, we're doing this because it's an eccentric. It's going to allow us to build better tension throughout the full range of motion of hip external rotation as we go down. So same thing, I'm going to push down, nice and slow, really trying to resist hard until I get to my full end range of motion, and I'm going to bring it back up. If you want to use the hand, you can use that as well. So bring it up as much as possible. And I'm pushing down, trying to drive the knee up against my hand. Going nice and slow. The slower you do this, the better it is. We're going to do 2 more. We like to use eccentrics because it helps build better resilience at the tendon and the overall muscle itself. So the slower we do this and the more tension we can build up, the better it will be for our overall tendon and ligament health. I'm going to push down. Really trying to resist that hand as much as you can. And we're going to do one last one on this side before we switch. So again, the main goal here is trying to improve full range control in butterfly position. And we're using eccentrics to do that. And once you finish that last rep, we're going to switch. Same thing on the opposite side now. Getting that knee up nice and high to start. Going to use either the elbow or the hand to drive it down. Make sure you're staying nice and tall through the chest. Slowly pushing down, resisting that as much as I possibly can. We're doing 5 reps. Again, just like with the PAILs rails before, if there's any pain along this line, back off of it a little bit. Don't work through any painful ranges, especially with closing angle. Or if there's pain on the outside of the hip when we push down, that's your closing angle. So trying to avoid pain there. Keep slowly pushing down, trying to drive that knee up. We're going to do 3 more like that. And again, your end range is gonna be different based off your current mobility limitations. So don't just keep cranking past the point where you can't feel tension pushing back up. So the whole time I'm trying to really drive that knee back up towards my chin. And once I can't anymore, that's when I bring it back up. Trying to make it one smooth movement the entire time. We got one last rep. Make sure you stay nice and tall through the chest. After you finish that rep, stay in butterfly. We're gonna do a couple more things here. So now we're gonna maintain butterfly position, but we're gonna work through an upper body exercise just to give the lower half a little bit of a break. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a butterfly swimmer hover here, which can be a pretty difficult exercise. So if you need to, you might have to do a one-sided versus a two-sided variation I'm gonna show you to start. So we're gonna set ourselves up nice and tall, trying to get as much thoracic extension as we possibly can here, okay? From there, I'm gonna take my hands behind my head. I'm gonna try to keep the knees down as far as possible. So you see my knees are gonna pop up a little bit, just because I'm a little bit limited here. We're gonna really fight to try to keep them down as much as possible. So staying nice and upright through the chest. We're gonna pull the hands off the head, rotate up into that Y like we've done in the past, down into a T, rotating the palms over, keep pulling the shoulder blades back, and then hinging at the elbows, coming down. Now we're gonna reverse that, pull back, extend out into that T again, and come into that Y position. Make sure the head doesn't shoot forward. Try to keep it nice and high. Hinge at the elbows, and then relax. Next one I'm gonna show you is gonna be the one arm variation where you give yourself a little bit of hand support, okay? So I'm gonna use the hand to try to get me as upright as possible through my chest. I'm gonna bring the hand behind my head. I'm gonna extend off and reach up. I'm gonna rotate into that T position, rotating the thumb down towards the floor, extending back, and rotating the hand behind my back. Now we're gonna reverse that, extend back, up into that T, come up overhead, hinge at the elbow, and then back on. We're gonna switch sides, doing the same thing. Again, figure out where you need to lean back, but as long as you're trying to stay upright in that position, not letting that chest cave too far in. So same thing, corkscrew the hand into the floor. You're gonna start with the hand behind your head, extend off and up into that T position, rotate the thumb down, hinge at the elbow, and then relax it on your back. Now we're gonna reverse, extend back, try to touch the wall behind you, into that T, come up into that Y, hinge at the elbow, and then relax. We're gonna do one last rep with the two arm variation. Again, if you need to do the one arm again, okay? So build up your tension, trap air in your lower abdomen, so really trying to squeeze the lower abs as hard as you can. Hands up top, extend off, reach up, rotate towards that T, thumbs rotate under, extend back, hinge at the elbows. And now reverse that, rotating up, stay nice and tall, hinge at the elbows, and relax. So now we're gonna transition from butterfly into bear sit through isometric movement paths. So there's gonna be two different ways to do this. The first way, we're gonna use our hands out in front of us rather than using the floor for support. We're gonna lift one leg up, try to bring it up from the foot, and we're slowly gonna transfer it out in front, trying to have a vertical shin in line with the knee. Now from here, I'm gonna lift my other foot, extending out into the opposite side of that bear sit. Okay? Now from here, we're gonna bring it back in the same way. So I'm gonna lift from the foot, try to stay nice and tall, pulling it into my groin as much as possible. We do the same thing, try not to let the knee fly up, trying to lift the foot, slowly bringing it back in. To make this easier, if that's a struggle, you bring the hands behind you to give yourself some support, but then it also closes off the amount of hip flexion you need to maintain this position. So we're going to do 1 rep with the hands off on the floor. I'm going to lift off from the foot. I'm going to bring it out in front and slowly place it down. Now we do the same thing with the other leg. I'm going to build up my tension throughout my upper back, driving this foot into the floor. I'm going to lift and slowly place it down. And now we're going to reverse that. I'm going to lift from the foot again, lifting up, gently putting it down on the floor. Now same thing with the opposite leg, lift up, bring it in. We're going to do that 3 more times. So use the hands on the floor if you need to. From here, 1 leg at a time again, lift up, drop it out in front, and then same thing with the opposite leg. Staying nice and tall through the chest, reversing that now, lift up, and same thing with the other foot. You go 2 more reps. If you're feeling up to it, you can go both legs at the same time. I'm gonna do it with hand support. You're gonna lift up and then slowly bring them out in front. As you can see, that one's gonna be a lot harder. So unless you have really good control, make sure you start with the one side to initiate. And as you get better and better, then you can try 2 at the same time. We'll do the same thing, trying to lift up. And again, I'm not getting anywhere here. So I'm gonna go back to the one-sided one, and this is where you figure out your limitations. So this is a case where I can do a PAILs rails contraction here. I could do some passive range holds, but again, figure out where you're limited, and then start to improve whatever positions you wanna get better at. So I'm gonna lift from the foot again, trying to bring it into my groin as much as possible, and then slowly putting it down. Now same thing with the left foot, lifting up, gently putting it down. We're gonna do 1 last rep. I'm gonna go hands back in front, one side at a time, lifting up, slowly putting it into that bear sit position. And now same thing with the left foot, and gently putting it down. And now reversing it, lifting from the left foot, bringing it in. And now same thing with the right foot, lift from the foot, and then gently put it down. So we're gonna do 1 final transition into bear sit, where we're gonna go through a PAILs rails position there. Now I like to use PAILs rails in bear sit, not only because it helps expand ranges of motion again, but it also helps me create context if I'm teaching someone how to squat or sumo deadlift, because it creates a very similar feeling. So before we get to that point, we're gonna transfer back into the bear sit position. So I'm gonna lift from my foot, bring it up on back out, ankle and knee are in a straight line, and then same thing here. I'm gonna lift up, bring it out. And now very similar to butterfly position, I'm going to take my hands, put them on my shins, my elbows are on my knees, okay? As I go through this, I'm actively dorsiflexing my toes, so I'm trying to bring them up towards my shin as much as possible. I'm getting upright through the chest again, okay? So my PAILs contraction here is gonna be me pushing the elbows into the knees, knees into the elbows again, just like butterfly. The rails contraction, just like butterfly position, is gonna be me trying to pull the knees towards the floor again. So PAILs pushing up, rails pulling down. So hands on the shins, elbows on the knees. We're gonna push knees into elbows, elbows into knees, 25% as hard as we can. We're pushing up into the elbows with the knees, pushing down into the knees with the elbows, 50%. Puffing the chest out, get it nice and upright. We're gonna push down, 75%. Now your hardest contraction, 100% pushing down for 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rails contraction, try to drive the knees towards the floor. You won't get much movement here. You're still gonna try to pull down though. Stay nice and tall through the chest. Keep holding for 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hands back on. Make sure you don't lose your position. Just like the other PAILs rails, we don't want the knees to come flying up. Keep them down. Hold for 5 breaths. Fully exhaling. Nice relaxed breathing. We're going to take 2 more breaths, and then we're going to work through that cycle again, trying to expand a little bit more. We're going to set up the same way. Hands are back on, chest nice and tall, knees into elbows, elbows into knees, 25% as hard as you can. Now we're pushing down at 50%. 75%. Your hardest contraction into the elbows, pushing at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rails contraction. Try to pull the knees towards the floor. Trying to touch them down towards the floor as much as I can. Really trying to open the hips up. We're going to keep holding for 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. When you do that correctly, you'll probably feel the outer part of your hips kick on. You might feel some of the inner groin too. It's going to be different for everybody based off the restrictions, but those are the 2 spots you should be feeling this primarily. Again, we're going to hold for 5 breaths, and then you're going to relax there. Take 2 more full inhales, 2 more full exhales. And relax. You're going to stay. So now the last thing I want to work on in bear sit is going to be an end range rotation, working on internal and external rotation of the hip. And again, today's focus is external rotation, but it doesn't hurt to go in both directions while doing these. So we're going to set up. I'm going to lock my left side into place, so this side's staying still. I'm going to build tension throughout my right hand. I'm going to rotate through my heel, bringing myself into as much internal rotation as possible without any pinching in the knee or the hip. Once I can't get any more, I'm going to slowly rotate back out, trying to get a little bit more range. Driving that knee towards the floor, just like our rails contraction. We're going to do that for 4 cycles. So rotating up, pivoting through the heel, focusing on the opposite side of your body, staying nice and still. Once I can't go anymore, I'm going to slowly rotate back out. Making sure that the tempo is the same at the way in as it was on the way out. So our internal and external rotation should be the same speed while doing this. Rotating back in. Trying to watch that femur rotate nice and clean. And then rotating back out. As you go through, you're trying to get a little bit more range with every single rep. We're going to do that one more time. Rotate in, pivot through the heel. Once you can't rotate in anymore, you're going to rotate out and then relax that right side. Now we're going to do the same thing on the left, so just compare how it feels when you get into that internal rotation versus external rotation versus on that right side. See if there's a difference. Same thing, get nice and tall. Going to rotate in as much as possible. And then I'm slowly going to rotate out. I'm going to pretend that someone was pushing against my knee as I rotate down towards the floor. Again, still actively dorsiflexing both sides, pivoting through the heel. Stay nice and tall through the chest. Once you can't get any more internal rotation, slowly rotate back out. Getting as much external rotation as possible. Got 2 more reps. Rotate in. And then rotate back out. Whole time keeping that right side as still as possible. We got 1 more rep. rotate in, getting good clean rotation of the femur, and rotating back out. Now we're going to go to a standing position and we're going to use the PVC pipe. So now we're going to go through some passive range holds in a standing position, and you're going to want to use the PVC pipe just to help you with your balance a little bit. If you don't have a PVC pipe, a wall works, anything to hold on to just to maintain some stability. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do 3 5-second holds with each of these. I'm going to bring my foot up as much as I possibly can, and now from here I'm going to build tension throughout my body. I'm going to let go and try to hold that position, not letting it drop. We're going to hold for a 5 count. And then we're going to put our hands back on. We're going to do that 2 more times. So we're working on trying to maintain this position, trying to make our passive flexibility active mobility, just like we've talked about in the past. So push the pull down, slowly let go, hold that position. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, back on. One last one, pushing down into the floor with the pipe. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, relax down. Do the same thing on the opposite side. The key here is slowly letting go of that leg to make sure it doesn't just completely drop on you. You want to build up tension everywhere in your body to try to maintain the position of it when you do let go. So I'm pushing down into the floor, driving the foot down as well. I'm going to lift up into ER, driving the pipe down. Slowly letting go and holding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Back on. The whole time I'm trying to lift my foot towards my face. That's what I'm thinking as I let go. I'm going to let go, hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to do 1 more rep. Drive that pipe into the floor. I'm squeezing my left leg as hard as I can. Slowly letting go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax down.